I came back.
Okay. All right.
I thought I should get out too. I wasn't sure if that was gumming you up. So
My computer just does not take like it doesn't like Zoom. I don't know what's going on, so I had to switch to the other one.
well.
So let me screen share.
Yeah, let's see if this works. Make sure I have everything set.
Make you the co-host. So can you screen share then?
I will try it here. Let's see if I can do that. Do you see it?
Oh yeah, there you go.
Cool. All right. Okay, should I stop sharing and we'll let you do your introductions first?
Yeah, if you don't mind, I'll just give a quick introduction.
Cool.
Do you want people to ask questions throughout, or would you rather them?
Yeah, they can. Yeah, they
Okay.
can. You know, and if, like I said, if some of these multimedia things work, I think it should be interesting to see. You know, it's one thing for me to talk about, it's another thing to actually say, wow, here's this little 8-minute film. This is kind of neat, or this podcast, you know.
Yeah.
I hope
Perfect.
it works. And if it doesn't, well, you know, get on the webpage and try it. So.
Yeah, exactly. Speaking of, I'm going to list a place where they can view your books.
Oh, cool.
Just find the link.
Yeah, it's So how have you guys been open at all in the last year and a half, or has it been quiet?
Yeah, no, we have lots of other stuff has happened too. This summer we experienced a pretty crazy flood out here. So
what? Wow.
yeah, the entire corral and plazuela were flooded, and some of the rooms around the plazuela. So yeah, it was not a good recording too. Hello, everyone. Just wait a couple of minutes for people to sign in.
It's fine.
How are you? Good to see you.
Hi, good to see you too. Good to see you all.
It's been too long, yeah.
Way too long.
Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Hi, Russ.
Hi. It would be much nicer if Deb, if I was there in person.
Yes.
And we could go down to that great restaurant and drink too much beer. But
Yeah, we're all way overdue for dining out.
Deb, your hair looks like mine now.
Yeah, it's getting that way.
Yes, my wife keeps saying, will you cut it? And I go, just leave me alone. So oh, we can't hear you. They're saying they can't hear us in the chat.
Hmm. You're not on mute. I don't see anybody on mute.
Maybe they should check their, oh, other people say they can hear us.
Okay.
Maybe the person in chat needs to adjust their microphone or their
Well,
speaker.
it is 1 o'clock, so I'll go ahead and get us started here. So hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this month's second Saturday program. My name is Aaron Gardner. I'm the site manager here. Casa San Ysidro is a satellite location of the Albuquerque Museum, and we are open for guided tours scheduled Tuesday through Saturday. We close to the public, however, in December and January. To find tickets, you can go to holdmyticket.com and search for us there. So today we have Dr. Russell Skowronek joining us. Russ will give us an overview of the Civil War history in the Southwest. Dr. Russell Skowronek is the Houston Endowment Chair for the Civic Engagement and founding director of the Community Historic Archaeological Project with Schools program at the University of Texas, Rio Grande Valley. There he is professor of anthropology and history and serves as the associate dean overseeing the School of Interdisciplinary Programs and the community engagement in College of Liberal Arts. Russ is also an author of many books and monographs on topics such as the American Civil War, pirates, British and Spanish shipwrecks, the prehistoric peoples of the lower Rio Grande, and Spanish colonial life. So thank you so much for joining us today, Russ. Please welcome Dr. Russell Skowronek. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask them throughout.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me to today. And as some of you know, the invitation had actually been offered back for March of 2020. And as we're all well aware, a certain unpleasantness has befallen the world. So I feel like we're in some kind of a bad Vincent Price film for the last 2 years. I'm dating myself, but I'm sure many of you will remember those films, The Last Man on Earth and things like that. But we finally figured out a way that we could do this via Zoom, and I'll try to keep the jokes moving as best as I can through it all. And as Aaron pointed out, if you have questions, you can give me the finger of your choice and I'll try to stop and take it from there. But you'll have to speak up because when we share the screen, I think I'm only going to see 2 people or something like that. So, you know, and just we'll take it from there. But I'm hoping that this will run about an hour. I hope maybe a little less. And if the multimedia part works, you don't have to listen to me the whole time. So that's a good thing. And there's one other thing I'll throw out there so that Deb doesn't think that we took advantage of her 4 years ago. God, 3 years ago. We are the data collection on the copper project, I believe, is done. We are now in the writing phase. So good things are coming. And you're gonna say, so is Christmas, Russ. But at any rate, we'll get to that. Are we ready for me to get on board? Are you going to share with me now? Okay, let me give this a shot. Hopefully. Well, I'm not sure you've shared it with me. Ah, there we go. Now, can you see it? Do you see the screen? Okay, Aaron's nodding, so I'll take that as a positive. Since I talked to you last, actually, my title changed. I am still an associate dean, but now they put me in charge of faculty research and diversity because they probably don't trust me with anything else. But any rate, here we are, and let me talk to you a little bit about about this American Civil War in the Lower Rio Grande Valley and about what we've been doing. This is going to be kind of a combination. If I can find my arrow, I'd be really happy. There we go. This will be a combination, as you'll see, of little history, but also about how we came to this. And I do want to say to you guys is that you live in God's country. I know that as a child when I used to go to New Mexico, I was aware of that. An appreciation for the past was there. I live in a part of the country where an appreciation of the past is for the most part lacking. And that is the reason, part of the reason why I was brought here. I was brought here to create this program, the CHAPS program, the Community Historical Archaeology Project with schools. It's not just about archaeology, it's not just about history, but it is about community. It's about what's a special place to live. And I like to start these things, and I've talked about this in my career and elsewhere, with this quote. I love this quote. This quote I saw it for the first time. I read it in a poetry book when I was in college. And it was like, it just resonated with me. And I remembered there were times I would go to a class and a teacher, one of the professors, was so engaging that to this day, I can still hear the intonation. It just brought me in and sucked me into this. And I'll tell you, if you ever have the opportunity, read this poem by John Masefield. It's good. And what has always driven me as a result of that is that, yes, I'm an anthropologist, I'm a historian, I do research, I do all the stuff that no one ever reads. You know, you publish in these journals and no one ever reads them. But I've always taken the side of how can we get out further? How can things like, you know, NOVA programs, how does National Geographic, how do you engage at museums and elsewhere? How do you get people so that they can not just read about the past, but they can touch the past, so that they can appreciate where they live? And as you can see, you know, we want to leave things for our children. And our program, which I've mentioned to you already, you know, we focus locally. That's one of the key things. And I will say this to you folks, and you, I'm sure, will all appreciate this. You guys focus locally because that's where the Albuquerque Museum is and where the Casa is. It's there and it makes sense. But if you are in a university setting, the basic opinion is the more exotic place you work, the sexier it is, right? This is where people want to go. If you work locally, how hard can that be? Well, you guys, and I look at Aaron, I can see Deb there, and we all, you know, it's sort of like my hair wasn't always this color. It's hard to work locally because everyone thinks they know everything, number one, and God knows every ordinance is in place as you work through. So these are tough things. They think it's easy. It isn't. We try to do research on local topics and issues. We don't just educate, and this also drives people nuts in universities. We don't just educate undergraduate and graduates. I am working with K through 12 teachers for the most part. I go to the schools, but I deal with the teachers because I know that today's 8th grader will be tomorrow's matriculated university student. I want to have people buy into this stuff and go into it. I also like working with the local public who say, I didn't know that was here. And in fact, the initiative we're working on right now is called Ancient Landscapes of South Texas, Hiding in Plain Sight. And everyone's going, there's a petrified forest here? Yes. You know, there's a volcano? Yes. You know, these are things people don't know, and we're trying to engage them. And so we're trying to engage people differently. Now, you know, we do this stuff, and it sounds like I'm selling my university. I'm not, but I'm trying to explain to you how we got to this thing. So even when this university was officially founded in 2015, it had come from other sources, but in 2015, we ended up on their mission statement, and you can see some of the stuff there about the Rio Grande Valley Civil War Trail. Carnegie engaged institution, and I can tell you, we were the poster child for the university for that. So we're very proud of the stuff we've done. So as I said, we're educating, we're promoting our region for sustainable growth and trying to contribute to livability and quality. Now, listen, you guys live at the other end of the Rio Grande. You would have had to have been locked in your house for the last 2 years. Oh, I guess we were. We all know what's been going down at my end of the Rio Grande, and it ain't been pretty. And the issue is that that seems to be the only message that ever comes out about down here. And that can be from locking children in cages to the idea that there is a flow of drugs all the time. And as I think I lamented to Deb several years ago, my best friend in the world in North Carolina, his daughter and my daughter were the same age. I wanted his daughter to come down and his wife would not allow her to come. And I said, well, why? It's not safe. The thought was that I was being shot at, leaving my car and coming into the office. It's like, it ain't good press that we got here. So what do we have? We got lots of economic engines, lots of commercial agriculture, cotton, other things down here, sorghum, lots of health stuff, people back and forth, manufacturing, NAFTA and the new use mecca, SpaceX, whether you like them or not. I know you guys have got SpaceX too, so I'll let you talk about that. I'm not a great fan, but you know, it is what it is. Liquefied natural gas, not a big fan, but you know, they put it where people are impoverished. So there we go. We got lots of educational stuff down here, security, obviously, but lots of tourism. And the tourism that does come down here, you know, what does it mean? Well, it means stuff for livability and quality of life. And the things that come out of it is, and here it comes the key stuff that we were just talking about, Aaron. You know, everyone wants something new, but every time you build something new, things happen. I'm living in a place that has some of the finest agricultural land in the entire country for the last century. I had lived in a similar place in the Bay Area. Bay Area became Silicon Valley. Down here, it's been transformed since NAFTA in the 1990s. Now, instead of growing crops, we grow houses here. We lose farmland, we're losing prehistoric sites. No one's ever done surveys down here. You can see where we're coming in with chaps doing this work. They're demolishing historic streetscapes. You know, there's old Gertrude Steins. There is no there. And then my old boss from the National Park Service, who started his career in New Mexico at places like Montezuma's Well and elsewhere, George Fisher, who, I'll be embarrassed, I have his ashes here on the table with me. At any rate, George, here we go, your quote. They just don't make historic sites anymore. And we put that in our book. And he always admonished me when I worked for him with the Park Service. He'd give me that line and he'd say, don't screw it up, Russ. Because if you do, there's no chance. There's no second chances. And those of us in historic preservation get it. And we all understand that. Down here, they want to build walls. We build walls and it disrupts biodiversity. Even, you know, we have ocelots down here. We used to have jaguars down here. Well, there won't be many after this. We also have tourism. And these things, though, do tie into livability and quality of life. So just to let you know, we have people come down here every year. They spend $700 million. It's a lot of money for a place like this. Maybe not, you guys are more urbanized than we are, but we have eco-tourists come down here that want to see birds and butterflies that aren't any place else in the United States. Almost $500 million. You know, we've always said ecotourism and heritage tourism is two sides of the same coin. And as I often point out, there are days when the birds and butterflies don't want to get out of bed because it's so bloody cold. So let's give them something to do. Let's let people see something else and realize there's more down here than the bad press or birds and butterflies. And part of the thing that's come with this is we've been able to push forward, and I will say in part because of the CHAPS program, a new generation has been hired in, and we've gotten an NEH grant, and the university has approved a public heritage program that deals with both ecotourism and heritage tourism, this public heritage. And I just reported to Aaron a few minutes ago, I found out as I just was coming here to fire up, Deb, they may let me retire. And the reason they may let me retire is they are not hiring one person They are hiring 2 people to do what I've been doing. They're going to be hiring an archaeologist to deal with the public archaeology and a public historian. And a guy who has got degrees in both history and anthropology can now let 2 people do the job that one person's been doing. And we'll move this forward and end up hopefully training people from the region to interpret their region to visitors that come here and to school children. So this is my big preamble, but I want you to understand is that what I'm going to talk to you about comes with this kind of a sense of things. I have gone from being the tired old sad sack professor. Well, I'm still tired in a sad sack, but I've become with an eye towards how do you sell this stuff? Who am I talking to? When I talk to people in government, it's heads and beds. How much tax revenue? How are we going to make money out of this? And I am trying to do this in a way that we preserve our public heritage, but give people sustainable growth at the same time. So, let's talk about the Rio Grande Valley, and I will be talking about my end of the Rio Grande Valley, the last 200 miles from Laredo to the Gulf of Mexico. Not your part of it, though I'm going to talk about you guys just a little bit. And I hope to see at least Aaron and Deb nodding, because I know that you guys have probably seen this. When we talk about the Civil War, and we also know that in the last year and a half and last few years, the images of the Civil War, which we always knew were bad, we're still dealing with the fallout from it 170 years later. So just leave it at that. Why a Rio Grande Valley Civil War trail? Partially, it's timing. And I like telling this story because, we always hear about how do these ideas happen? You say, gosh, you were so inspired, Russ. I wasn't inspired. In 2011, 2010, I still had family members alive in North Carolina, and I would drive out there from Texas and come back. And you drive and, you stop at every rest stop on the way back along the interstate section, and you say, wow, look at these things. They're talking about the sesquicentennial of the Civil War. And of course, I'm old enough to remember the centennial of the Civil War, God help me. And I'm old enough to remember the last guy who was a veteran that died of the Civil War. Really, God help me. But timing. And it's like, this is going on. And I'm sitting in one of my colleagues' offices, guy in the history department, and saying, there's all this stuff out there. How come we don't have anything in Texas? And we're kind of talking, if we'd had cocktails, it would have come to us faster. That came later. But one of the things that I have always sold back to my days of the National Park Service and as my own childhood was that education just doesn't happen in classrooms. You have to go, you make site visits like they do out there to the Casa and other places like that. You go to national parks, you do this stuff. And I've always been a strong adherent to saying, let's do stuff on site. It brings community pride. People like thinking, again, is there really no there, or do we have a story to tell? A lot of times you hear about this stuff and they say, oh, we only hear about the Pilgrims. We only hear about this. We only hear about Gettysburg or Antietam. We don't hear about stuff out in other parts of the country. Do we have pride? Do we have veterans here? It leads to heritage and ecotourism, which I've already talked to you about. It can be a form of economic development. And it would give a foothold for public heritage. And one of the key things that comes with this is we started thinking about this and we said, what could we do? Is there something here for us? And I don't need a show of hands, but I hope Deb will at least nod, and maybe Aaron. You guys probably remember when this came on TV 30 years ago now. I was living in Michigan at the time, and I watched it. And I watched it, and it was like, oh yeah, Civil War. I had been studying Spanish colonial things for the previous 20 years, but when this came on, I didn't give it much thought. And of course, the story that comes out of Ken Burns and anything they ever taught us in school was that, when you add it all up with casualties and wounded and everything else, you're talking about 1 million people. which at that time period, you're talking about a population of about 30 million people, huge amount of death and destruction with the American Civil War. And you watch it, you go, wow. And of course, I watched it like everyone else in 1990, and I never looked at it again. 20 years later, I did look at it again. And I realized that if you didn't talk about something from the Mississippi to points east, there was nothing. Nothing was mentioned. And in fact, to make you guys, so that Aaron doesn't think I saved this from some other talk, you've got a couple of battle sites out there. And of course, God knows I watch The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly every time it's on TV, as recently as last week. And you know, I watch these things and I say, gosh, out of those million casualties, 1,000 people were casualties in New Mexico. You know, and you look at that and you go, wow, here it is all the way out there. 1,000 people were killed. And again, this also dates me. Some of you will remember this guy. You know, Paul Harvey would say, here's the rest of the story. So here it is. No one's talked about west of the Mississippi. I'm sitting in this guy's office. We're talking about stuff and we say, And we start between the two of us, even though I'm not a Civil War historian, he's not a Civil War historian. The two of us start rattling off stuff and we probably came up with about 20 places just in our region. And again, I pose this question, was there a Civil War trail in Texas? No. We had some brochures. They still print these brochures. No trail. They're very proud of their trails in Texas. No discussion of this. For a place that keeps wanting to secede, and there are times it's like, go already. Oh, I didn't say that. You know, other people have these brochures, and we know they've set things up. There's Alabama and some other places, Arkansas. We have battlefields down there. Not much interpretation, but they're battlefields. He said, you know, why would we have this here? Is war always tied with battles? Well, if you have to have battles, there actually were not two. We have a dozen battles that were fought here. Now, these are not full-pitched battles like Antietam and Gettysburg and things like this. We're talking about, you know, companies of folks, you know, 40, 150 guys battling back and forth, mostly cavalry battles taking place back and forth. But this section of the Rio Grande that you're looking at in this image runs from the coast down there in Brownsville all the way up to Laredo. And you can see that there are sites all along that where there were battles. And in fact, I'm going to mention one of these ones coming up, but one was fought on the exact same day that Fort Sumter was being bombarded in 1861. And of course, the last battle takes place a month after, or 3 weeks after Appomattox and after Abraham Lincoln is killed, Palmito Ranch. So, you know.
So I left the meeting on your own.
Sorry, go ahead. Oh. All right, I'll go on. So let me talk about why this becomes important to the story of the American Civil War and why I think it's sold here. You know, when we often talk about, again, the Civil War, we think about the plans for how it was supposed to be run. And again, you guys know the Forgotten War out in New Mexico. The story of the Eastern United States is the story of the so-called Anaconda Plan, or again, they call it Scott, which was Winfield Scott, who was the head general at the beginning of the war. And the idea was to blockade Southern ports and strangle the South into submissions. And that leads to blockade running and all the stuff with Gone with the Wind and all the rest of this crap. And you can see this thing. And of course, what it's showing down in the bottom left of the image is that the snake is coming up the Rio Grande. But there's a big problem. And the problem is international law. You can blockade all the ports you want But you can't blockade the Rio Grande because the Rio Grande was an international boundary. And that means that that river has to be open for commerce. If you blockade the Rio Grande, you are basically throwing down like you're making war on Mexico. You can't do that. And other countries would say, well, we're coming to aid Mexico. And of course, that would be Britain and France, which we can talk about. So the snake looks great in this picture, but the reality is the Rio Grande is supposed to be an open boundary. And that's why the Civil War is very important here. It's important, as you can see here with this thing, is King Cotton. Cotton from the South in 1861 represented $47 million. The Southern Treasury at the beginning of the war in 1861, it was the 5th largest treasury in the entire world because they had cotton. And the images that you see here on the map are not only railroad lines, which are very short, but then overland trails that are known as the cotton trails that lead into Mexico and down to the Rio Grande. And on the right is an engraving showing in the foreground stacks of cotton and Matamoros across the river in Mexico. So the cotton is being taken over to Mexico during the war. This was the only port open in the Confederacy for trade, and it generates $162 million just at this port of Brownsville during the course of the war, which today is nearly $3 billion. $3 billion that buys weapons, that buys medicine, that buys other things. When we often talk about war, we talk about pitched battles. You don't have pitched battles if you don't have war materials. This is the thing that we never teach people. This is why when we have economic blockades, the idea is to try to not have the carnage of the battlefield. That's a lot of money, to say the least. There was another white gold besides cotton. No, not that white gold. That's from the 1980s. This is the white gold, salt. In this section of the valley is a place known as Sal Del Rey. And you'll notice right off the bat, it's not my poor Spanish. It should be El Sal, but it has always been known as Lasalle down here. So it's that way. But this salt place is not a salt dome as in Louisiana. This is actually because we have a lot of evaporation here. It's so bloody hot. And salt comes in here. It was used prehistorically. We know that native peoples came up from Mexico and took the salt. We know that during the Spanish colonial period, the salt was taken down in mule trains down to Zacatecas to the mines, not only to for preserving food and other items, but also for tanning leather. And in the Confederacy, it was used for the same thing. I think we often forget that, of course, at this time period, the only way to preserve food was to either brine it, that is, pickle it with salt, or to dry it and pack it in salt, that sort of thing. So salt was important. You use it for tanning leather, and think about it. You need harnesses for horses. You need it for saddles. You need everything else. Salt was something else. And I'll tell you, we go out there to this site sometimes and blocks of salt. I mean, you take them out with a saw or with a sledgehammer and load it up and take it down there. And I can only say the first time I went out there, I went out, and it shows you I'm an old Midwesterner. I went out there with my wife, and we looked at it and we thought we were walking out on a frozen pond. And we were going to drop through it. And our friend, the geologist, laughed at us and he said, "You're walking on stone. You know, this is salt." And we're going, "Oh yeah, sorry about that." But you know, we're old retreaded Midwesterners, and God knows I never want to see a snow shovel again, but I digress. So we have got salt here. We've got battles here. The last land battle is fought here in a month. You can see it's May 12th and 13th, 1865. battles here. Why is there a battle being fought? It's not that they didn't know the war was over. There were thousands of bales of cotton still controlled by the Confederacy. They were trying to get it into Mexico to make money before the war ended and the cotton was picked up. And I should add that one of the key people down here that was a cotton broker took his money that he had made over the decades, went back home to New York and opened what is today Citibank. When we hear about many of these banks being based on slave dollars, well, this was based on salt and the cotton trade. So these are some of the things that show up here. And I'm trying to give you some more details as we go through, but I just trying to give you the once over lightly. So we say this has got a story. We could do this, but I've already told you, I'm no Civil War historian. I'm intrigued, but I'm not a Civil War historian. I've worked on sites doing archaeology and others, but that's it. Neither was he. So we do what we're supposed to do. This is the good anthropologist in me. You don't be the 500-pound gorilla and tell people what you do. You go to people and you say, who knows the region better? The people in each county, at the local historical societies, or some, jerks in the university in the tower. We got these folks together, and you can see there, some of them National Park Service uniforms, some of them U.S. Fish and Wildlife, some of them just museum directors. From Brownsville to Laredo, 200 miles. We got them all in a room together. We told them the idea. If I could have, I would have fed them liquor, but I didn't. I bought them lunch, and we said, look, is this a good idea? And everyone said, oh, this is a great idea. And I said, well, if everyone thinks it's a good idea, then we can move to the next stage. Well, the next stage, they all thought I was going to ask them for money. And you guys know how that works. When you're starting to go for the pitch, everyone's shoes get really interesting. Boy, I really need to polish those, don't I? That kind of thing. And I said, I don't want your money. And everyone, there was visible sigh of relief. They're all set. You don't want money? I said, no, I don't have money either. But what we need is your knowledge. And they were shocked. And I said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, who knows the sites? What's important? What's there? Well, you guys do. And I go, yeah. Oh, you need us to write term papers. I don't want them to write term papers. I said, I don't want a term paper from you. You know what I want? I want one sheet of paper. They're all going, they think I'm nuts. And I said, one sheet of paper. Tell me where it's located. Tell me if it's open to the public. Tell me why it's significant. And everyone's going, well, we can do that. This was May, as you're seeing here, of 14. By August of 14, we had 50 sites identified. We began to edit the materials, put the stuff together. By February of 15, the Rio Grande Valley Civil War Trail was launched. And now we're going to tell you the rest of the story. And I think I've sent this to you, Aaron. If not, I'll send you copies of this thing. So, we've now printed 70,000 copies. That's a lot of copies, all done with grant money. I still haven't gotten anything else. Grant money, everything is bilingual. Why? Well, where I live, 85% of the people's first language is Spanish. I know who my clientele is. And we have people come from Mexico. And we talk about Mexico at the same time. Bilingual map gets people around, lets them know where things are located. And I'll show you some details of it. We learned some stuff along the way. Education's a good thing. I like doing this with people. Did you know? And if you look down there, you can say, well, I recognize the guy on the right. That's our 18th president. Why does he have stuff there from the Mexican War? Here's why. In 1846, there were 53 lieutenants in the U.S. Army that were at Palmito Ranch, at Palo Alto Battlefield, that went on to become generals in the Army. And we always talk to the students about it, is these people learned how to kill people. They learned each other's habits. And it's probably one of the reasons why the carnage was so great, because they knew each other. They knew some people slept in, they knew other things. President Grant was one of the guys that was down there at those days in those callow youth of being a lieutenant. So, you know, we're showing connections. And I mean, there were guys like Longstreet was down here, all these other ones that were part of the war. This other guy may not look familiar in this configuration. The great traitor of the United States. Ooh, I'm in trouble now. Then Colonel Robert E. Lee, who would be going on to not only be part of John Brown and the attack at Harper's Ferry, and he was there for all that. Colonel Robert E. Lee was down here in 1859 and 1860. He stayed at some of these places down here. And I know at the beginning when they were talking about the statues being removed, I had folks down here saying, well, we'll take them. And I looked at people and I gave them the steely-eyed look that Deb has seen when I cursed up a blue moon in the basement of the museum. And I said, the hell you'll take that statue. And they looked at me and I said, number one, that statue is of Lee, the traitor. And number two, it's Lee, the old man. And the point is this, is that you have a connection with these people. They know the region. Don't scuttle yourself. One of the other things that became really fascinating as we went through this is, you know, and I don't know how you guys in New Mexico, I know, had the same situation. You had people that were pro-Confederate, pro-Union. Oftentimes we look at the Civil War and we only think about, oh, these were the Confederate states, so everyone was with the Confederacy. Well, we know that isn't true. You know, that's why West Virginia exists, because there were people that said, no, we're not part of Virginia. We had folks down here who served on both sides. And as we began to do our research, and you can see here in these pictures, we've got, you know, photographs of some of the people that served here. And if you notice on the right side of the pictures, the gravestone on the right, the family has added a separate piece of concrete on top of it, and it says Civil War Vet, Union. And I want you to think about why that's important. These are people who are often seen as, well, they're not real Americans, they're Mexicans. Well, you know, the border crossed them. They didn't cross the border. This has been their home for the last 270 years. They've been here, and their ancestors served with the Union Army and in World War I and World War II, and they're making that statement. And so, you know, we try to bring that in there and say, so, you know, these are places that are on the trail. We also found out something I never knew before. Maybe you guys knew this being out there in New Mexico. The highest ranking Spanish speaking officer in the Confederate Army was Santos Benavides. The guy raised a cavalry regiment. According to Jerry Thompson, one of the great historians of the Civil War in the West, he said he would have been a general. The war ended, but he raised an entire regiment. And he often says he's one of the few regiments that never lost a battle over the course of the war. And he served, his troops served up and down, and his brothers were in the war, everyone else. So these are actually pictures. And it was interesting. I went to my daughter's middle school when she was, you know, decade ago. Now she's in graduate school, doesn't speak to me. Anyway, no. But I went there, and for Veterans Day, people put up pictures of their relatives who have been in the service. So she had my father and my father-in-law in World War II and everything else. And someone had this picture up. This is one of the descendants of it. So people are intrigued. Also here, and I don't think you guys got as much of this, people don't talk about the American Civil War and this aspect, but you can't understand the American Civil War in Texas if you don't understand that there was a civil war going on at the exact same time across the river. When Maximilian and the reactionaries took over Mexico from Juarez, you know, the Confederates made common cause with Maximilian. Juarez and Lincoln made common cause. And in fact, we have schools here that are known as Lincoln Juarez. People don't talk about that. So we've got these guys fighting across the river. The US, let me tell you, people talk about something. We've been running guns to Mexico for 150 years, and we still are. And it's here where they're doing it. We were running guns to Juarez. We were running stuff across the river. And I can also tell you that some of Maximilian's troops, Austrians and French, came onto this side of the valley and served with the Confederates against the Union. No one talks about that. But there was common cause. In fact, at the end of the war, and we'll get to this in a second, the reason why the posts were reoccupied was to keep the Confederate Army from going into Mexico, where they were going to reform, make common cause with Maximilian, and reinvade the United States. And there was an ancient movie made decades ago with Charlton Heston called Major Dundee. I remember watching it as a kid, and it's like, I had no idea about this. And they were intercepting a column of Confederates and their families who were trying to get to Mexico, and they intercepted them. And it's based on these kinds of stories. They don't ever talk about the fact that at the end of the war, many Confederates went to what is today Belize, and also to Brazil. And in fact, when Carter was governor, he went to Brazil and went into this one town where they were all cousins of his that had moved down there. It's a town called Americana and others. They have Confederate soldiers in their central square. We never talk about people leaving this country. People left this country. We also have something else here that you never hear about in schools. And we brought this out here. We had a branch of the Underground Railroad. I don't know about you guys, but the only thing I ever hear about is going over the Ohio River, going north, going north. Well, there was a branch that came down here, and it ran right past where I am right now in my office down there, and there were mixed race families down there. Husband was white, and his wife had previously been, chattel property in Georgia, in Alabama. Another one was up in the original Austin colony, and he bought his wife, who he'd had children with, from someone, and moved down here. And they moved down here because they could live as husband and wife when you couldn't live as husband and wife in this country until the 1960s, a mixed race family, right? Down here, you could do it. Why? Because the same rules weren't in place in these areas near Mexico. And if there was a problem, they could go across the river. We know they helped people escape to Mexico, which was a haven. No slavery there since 1829. It's one of the reasons why the Texas rebelled. African-American troops served at the Battle of Palmito Ranch in May of 1865. I'm going to show you, hopefully, this film. Yeah, well, if we have time, I'll be almost done with this. This guy served down here. They had served at Appomattox. They had served at Petersburg. They came down here. And in fact, after the war, they were the ones that guarded the border. And I always point out, I went to the Buffalo Soldier Museum as we were working on this, which is located up in near Houston. And that picture on the lower right, I had grown up with, we had no money. My father would buy these from the Army for $1 a piece. And I only saw the two white guys in the foreground on the horses. It wasn't until I was working on this project that at the age of 60 or whatever it was, I looked back and I said, yeah, they're the black soldiers. Stories to be told. Who was here? So is this it? Well, you probably hope it is, but no. We've published, like I said, the map, bilingual webpage, bilingual map, bilingual podcasts, workshops for teachers, K through 12 teachers, and more. Here's the maps. You can visit this thing. There's the web address, and I'm going to, hopefully we have a moment, I'll show you a couple of minor things in it, but all these places are broken down. You can listen to the podcasts in Spanish or English. And I'm going to try this one, okay, Aaron? We'll see if it works. And if so, we'll see. I don't know here we go. Please work. I don't want to be embarrassed. Okay.
This stop on the Rio Grande Valley Civil War Trail takes us to Hidalgo and Sal Del Rey Salt Lake, which for centuries was South Texas's main source of vital salt during the Civil War. In addition to seasoning, salt was the chief means of preserving meat and fish. Livestock, including cattle, mules, and horses, needed it, and salt was used in curing leather for shoes, harnesses, and other military goods.
I'm going to stop that for a second. Hopefully everything works. I don't want to be embarrassed. And
Durante siglos, este remoto lugar fue el destino por igual de indios norteamericanos, colonos españoles, comerciantes mexicanos y angloamericanos que...
Did that work? Okay. So you can see what we've done with that. Now, can I get back to this movie? How do I get back to the movie? Yes. Am I back to it yet? No, I got a million Zoom things open. Where the heck did you guys go? Don't give up on me. Oh. Now you can see it, right? Yeah. All right. So, Sal Del Rey, lesson plans. The guy who developed the lesson plans had been the head of testing in the schools for 20 years. He now teaches for us. So we got it. And it's not only used for 4, 7, 8, and 11, but 11th AP, and for freshmen in college. Traveling trunks, which I know you guys have traveling trunks. You do this stuff all the time. We went the whole 9 yards. I said, we're going to use reenactor grade. I want people to understand what clothing feels like, what it would look like. Lots of things, as you know, you can't give to kids. So we did posters up with different items that were on it: clothing, uniforms, weapons, stuff on the number of people that died. The guy who did the other book did this little book, which we published through Lulu, which means print on demand. This has been purchased. It's a bestseller. It's sold, I don't know, about 20,000 copies of it, because again, it was written with this in mind. It's been used in middle school, high school, and college classes. So, and in fact, on these images, I should mention on this, the 3 fellows that are here, the Confederate, the African-American, and the Union guy on the right, are all images of people who served in the Valley. The gentleman on the left was from Sweden originally. He came here in 1846 with the war in Mexico. That's his house, which still stands. And he got involved in the cotton business during the Civil War. You've heard about the books that we've published, which we're very pleased with. You know, the academic one and the one on the right is kind of like a tour book. We've also developed a traveling exhibit. 50,000 people in the pandemic, which I don't think is too bad, all over from Corpus Christi all the way up to Laredo. It's in Kingsville right now, and we're booked through 2022. I keep saying, Aaron, bring us to New Mexico. We talk about the war on the Rio Grande and these things. I'm showing you a little bit here. We talk about the idea about the back door of the Confederacy, white gold, cotton, and salt. Who were these people? Some of the folks I talked to you about. Talk about the idea of Mexico and the issues that, you know, why is this war going on? Who is there? Battles, people want battles, we give them battles. This has been one of the most compelling things we ever did, and some of my colleagues cursed me for it. But I always remembered going to the Vietnam Wall and how moving it was. And I said, well, we, like you guys, we're not talking about, in all the battles that were fought here, we're talking about, I shouldn't say diminish it, but yeah, we're talking about fewer than 1,000 people, casualties. But I said, wouldn't it be interesting if we had a list of all of the local families that actually served? And so what you have here are the names of everyone we could find that were in the Union and the Confederate forces. I had a student, and this one, Aaron and Deb, you guys can imagine the look of horror on your face when a student comes up to you and says, well, on my mother's side, I had a great-grandfather who was Union, and on my father's side, there was a great-grandfather who was Confederate. I'm going, oh God, be on here, be on here, be on here. She walks up, she's looking at it, and she points. And there they were. She brought the whole family together. They're posing next to, and it's like we brought their family members back. You know, it's amazing how, you know, it's like seeing your name in a newspaper and it's not either on the obituary page, God help us, or on the police blotter. You know, you want good things. U.S. colored troops, we talk a lot about them down here, and that's just the one thing I do want to show you before you throw me out. We have a bilingual catalog of the exhibit. It's a flip book. One side's all in Spanish, the other side's all in English. We've become masters of how you publish things that are upside down and backwards, depending on how it's done. We've got 3 films, and I know we're running short here on time. Can I show one of them? You think I can? I hope you guys will take a few minutes to watch. Which one do I do? I'm going to do June. No, I'm going to do June. No, I'm going to do Cotton Times. These are available. And again, you can download them. We have them there on our webpage and elsewhere. But I'm very proud of these films. They're give you a sense.
In the Old South, devastation characterized the region during America's Civil War. But the years between 1861 and 1865 were experienced differently by the citizens of the Rio Grande Valley. In the territory along the Rio Grande, between the Gulf of Mexico and Laredo, the experience of war can best be summarized in a single word: cotton.
So for many people living here along the Rio Grande and in South Texas, they didn't look upon this period as the Civil War, but spoke of it as the Cotton Times. Cotton was very important to the Confederate cause. The sale of cotton allowed the Confederate government to collect taxes that in turn enabled it to purchase war material and continue functioning. Cotton was also important to South Texas because it furnished us with employment and obviously furnished some people with considerable profits.
The town of Baghdad was located on the southern bank of the Rio Grande and provided a gateway to the Gulf of Mexico throughout the war years. From there, thousands of bales of Confederate-grown cotton that had been carried across the river into Mexico were shipped to ports around the world. Today, the once prominent port of Baghdad is buried under the shifting sands of the Rio Grande Delta, leaving it nearly forgotten. 150 years ago, during the American Civil War, this community played a critical role in the Confederate economy.
The expansion meant additional employment, additional profit, and certainly additional importance in terms of where Texas stood in the Confederate hierarchy. The best estimate we have is that the value of the goods transported in and out of Baghdad came to $162 million. But a dollar was worth a lot more then than it is now. Translating that in today's terms, the value would be $2,953,000,000, give or take a few cents.
To better understand the term Cotton Times, you have to understand Tejanos and the role this group played in the Rio Grande Valley's history.
The role that Tejanos played in the Civil War has been largely overlooked. We know today that almost 4,000 Tejanos served in the Confederate Army, and almost 1,000 Tejanos and Mexicanos from the Lower Rio Grande Valley enlisted in the Union Army in 1863 and 1864. This has largely been overlooked in the general histories of the war. The war was largely fought east of the Mississippi, which is certainly the case. The war had begun there at Fort Sumter and basically ended at Appomattox Courthouse with the surrender of Robert E. Lee.
As the war ground on, cotton became a major source of concern to the Union. The entire Union strategy depended on strangling the Confederacy's economy by preventing shipping either into or out of the South. The cotton flowing out of the Rio Grande Valley punched a major hole in the Union's efforts.
The events that occurred in the port enabled the Confederacy to resist longer than would otherwise have been the case.
As the war went on, the Union blockade became tighter and tighter, and port after port in the Confederacy fell. So by the time we got to 1864 or 1865, Baghdad was really the only open port the Confederacy had.
And when Lincoln put his blockade on the Confederacy, and this blockade became more effective as the war went on, the only way Texans could get their cotton to market, and even people from as far away as Arkansas and Louisiana, was to take it across the river into Mexico and then take it down the river either by steamboat or by wagon to Baghdad at the mouth of the river, where ships from all over the world waited to buy this Texas cotton.
Citizens of Mexico viewed this time as Los Algodones, their own version of the Cotton Times. Throughout the war era, the Mexican border town of Matamoros was crowded with foreigners buying and selling cotton. As a result, Matamoros was a thriving and prosperous place, allowing many to grow rich from what some might call an infamous trade. During the Cotton Times, men and boys, too old or too young to enlist in the military, worked as teamsters. These hardworking individuals drove wagons filled with bales of cotton. And for this backbreaking work, a teamster could earn $10 a month in Confederate currency.
For South Texas, there was also a problem, and that was that the cotton trade attracted Union invasions. When General Banks of the Union Army landed at Brazos de Santiago in November of 1863, he brought almost 7,000 troops with him, and one of his primary orders, one of his primary objectives, was to cut off the cotton trade.
Although Union forces were able to seize the northern bank of the Rio Grande in 1863, upriver, Confederate Colonel Santos Benavides of Laredo helped make possible the safe passage of cotton across the Rio Grande into Mexico. In 1864, Benavides' troops fortified San Agustin Plaza with 5,000 bales of cotton to keep it from falling into the hands of the Union. On March 19th, they repelled the U.S. 2nd Cavalry at the Battle of Zacate Creek, just outside of Laredo. Following the war and during Reconstruction, Benavides remained active in his mercantile and ranching activities, along with his brother Cristobal.
Probably the most prominent Tejano in Texas was Colonel Santos Benavides of Laredo, who was a captain in the 33rd Texas Cavalry, and then rose to become a major, and then eventually recruited a regiment all of his own, Benavides' regiment. And he ranks as the highest Mexican Texan in the Confederate Army, and essentially a brilliant record of military service. And his regiment was one of the few Confederate regiments in the entire war that never knew defeat. Benavides went on to a prominent political career after the war.
Another upriver site of great importance during the Cotton Times was the Mifflin Kennedy Warehouse at Davis Landing in what is now Rio Grande City, the hub for a far-flung mercantile network of steamboats, wagons, brokerages, and other business enterprises. It can be said that the Mifflin Kennedy Warehouse helped spur the Cotton Times. The warehouse was built in 1854 near the steamboat landing on Water Street, which at the height of the Cotton Times was an official Confederate port of entry.
No matter how remote we may think our area is, it really was not remote in terms of national events, or for that matter, international events. The events that took place in this valley demonstrated that the United States was not a nation isolated from the rest of the world. We were already a part of the global economy, and we were also a part of the global political balance. We all like to use the term globalization to refer to what's happening nowadays, but in an important sense, globalization also existed back then. We were part of a much larger trade network.
As the Civil War era faded into memory, the excitement of the Cotton Times was preserved in such architectural monuments as Rio Grande City's Mifflin Kennedy Warehouse, Brownsville's Neal House, and other sites on the Rio Grande Valley Civil War Trail, as well as in the memories of the region's Civil War veterans, both those who fought and those whose mercantile activities made the Cotton Times a reality.
All right, there you go. I'm telling you guys all these stories, and I swear they're not lies. So I'm going to wrap this up so that we can then, throw it open to questions and all. If you have a few minutes afterwards, I hope you'll take advantage and watch this The Juneteenth one really deals with the African-American troops down here. We're very proud of this, and it kind of tells a good story. The last one is a much longer film you can watch at some point, and it deals with the issue of the Underground Railroad down here. And so we're very pleased with all of these things. So let me wrap this up. We are marking the trail. Obviously you don't need to have markers in the ground anymore, but I like them. I'm old fashioned. I like to know that things are coming up. And so signage is going out there. We've been successful. We've been recognized for Juneteenth. We've been recognized by the Texas Historical Commission, the Texas Archaeological Society, lots of different things. We got international recognition for our outreach and public historical archaeology from the Society for Historical Archaeology, which I'm very proud of. We've been recognized in the state out of Texas, though I don't know how proud I am of that, but that's another issue. And this past year, we got the highest award in the state of Texas, the Governor's Award for Historic Preservation. I will count this as a big, big feather in our cap. You know, I don't know. Here's your final exam question. You know, can it be an engine for economic development? Well, did you learn something today? I hope you did. Are you happy you learned it? I hope you are. And if so, remember, the days that make us happy make us wise. Come visit us. Don't be scared to come to the lower Rio Grande Valley. We're nice people down here. We've got some great stories to tell. Thank you. All right. Why don't we go back to the main screen? Then people can hurl insults at me if there's anyone still awake. And I'll stop sharing. All right. How's that sound?
Thank you so much, Russ. I see that we do have some questions. Deb, did you have a question?
It was all perfectly told. There are no questions. You're like my students.
I did put a link to Russ's books in the chat. If you want to provide any links for the videos, you can send that to me, and I'd be happy to put them in the chat, or you can put them in there yourself.
I can probably do that while we're waiting here. Let me try to grab those ones that we just had so that you guys can see them. So at any rate, I really appreciate you guys inviting me. This may not have been what you were hoping for. I hope I'm wrong, but I hope that this is the sort of thing that you can understand what we've been trying to do at our end of the valley. And I think what we're doing, you know, complements other folks up and down. And now the fact that we are working with this, creating this public heritage class, or this not class, but it's a whole degree. You know, I look and I was saying there, and you know, they're hiring people because it's time for me to retire. And not only is it time for me to retire, but if you remember the picture I showed you, we were all viejos when we started this thing, that group of people that was involved there. Everyone's retiring. That generation, that so much of that generation that came out of the 70s and the 80s, that was, you know, we were all the first ones kind of doing this stuff. It's time to turn the baton over to a new generation of people. And I feel that if I've been successful, and I don't know if awards mean success, but if I've been successful because I've been talking to teachers and I've been working with my own students, that better prepares them from going out there to take these positions moving forward. This is what we want. We want people, not, you know, it sounds bad, not a carpetbagger like me that comes to South Texas from California by way of Michigan, by way of Florida. You know, I've bounced all over the country. I like to think that I'm an anthropologist. I can work anywhere, and I can. But I also know that I can bring my passion, but it sure helps when I have a student that says, I had a great grandfather in this and a great grandfather in that. It's the immediacy of it. And I think that's what we all need to dream of, is that we're leaving a legacy behind for the people that come behind us. And that's why places like the Casa are precious. And these collections are precious because, you know, I can guarantee you, they just don't make those historic sites anymore. And, you know, and George is laughing at me right now, but they don't. And if we don't try to preserve them, we're not going to have another chance. And this is true not only with the structures, but as I said, we're working on ancient landscapes. And one of these great geological features, they are now mining it for gravel. It's, you know, it's, you'd think it couldn't be gone. Well, they've shoveled it away. Part of the volcanic ash that was pristine and beautiful before we started our work, it was recorded in the geology books as being sandstone.
Oh, shit.
We discovered it's from 27.2 million years ago. Out of this volcanic ash formed a chert. Most chert forms under the ocean. This formed in this ash. It has a distinct fingerprint. And I know Deb will appreciate this. We've got evidence that native peoples have been exploiting it since the Pleistocene. You know, and you can see this stuff moving across the landscape because it's so distinct. So we're bringing the technology that we have to study these things, you know, like researchers writing articles, but we're then trying to explain it within the context of the natural landscape and everything else. I'm really been proud of what we've done here over the past. I've been here since 2009, and we have done the Civil War Initiative, and the Civil War Initiative proved that people could work together. And that may not sound like a big deal for you guys, but I can tell you down here, most people's only contact between towns is on Friday nights during the football season, right? And the people upstream pee in the river for the people downstream. They don't have any contact. When we got them together to work on this, in some cases, it was a first. Now people think together as a consortium, and we said, look, we got this trail. Now we're talking about a regional thing. I think we're moving in the right direction, and hopefully we'll keep it moving forward. And I think with the university making the commitment that they're doing is a good sign. And, you know, I can only say, cross your fingers, come down here, go to the beach, but visit me. I'll take you on a tour. It's a great thing. So other than that, I promise I'll come give a talk about the copper project and have the book in hand by that point. Okay.
Yay. I just want to mention that Russ's book is the one that he showed us is in the History Research Library, along with the interpretive map, which was very hard for me to leave behind when I left, but they are in there in Leslie Kim's office.
Well, that's great. In fact, and I'll add into the chat, if you guys want to email us, we can send you copies of the map and other things, but it's all online. So I will put in there the address for the web page and for us, but here, let me do that. So let's just, while we're talking here. And I'll let you go home. So there is the email address, and then the web page is gz.edu. Civil War. There, and there's the web address. So, you know, you can write to us if you want a copy of the map. We can send it to you. Other things, as Aaron's uploaded, you can get things off of lulu.com. You know, there isn't too much on the Civil War in the Rio Grande Valley, and it can all be ordered. And like I said, it's in Spanish and English, and we've been very proud of our work, and I sure appreciated the invitation to speak with you guys a year and a half ago, and I'm happy that I could finally deliver today. So.
Well, thank you so much, Russ. This is an incredibly important project that you're doing, linking sites together and people. Are there any more questions before we go?
Yeah, I've got a question for Russ.
Yes, Mr. McKinney.
And you're in El Paso, correct?
No, sir. I'm
Oh.
in McAllen, Texas.
Oh, McAllen, okay.
Yeah, I'm an hour from the Gulf of Mexico.
Okay,
This,
okay.
this
I-
university used to be University of Texas Pan American. And then there was University of Texas Brownsville. And on August 31st, 2015, at the stroke of midnight, those two schools became pumpkins. And University of Texas Rio Grande Valley was born. So
Okay.
that's the
No,
context.
I'm behind times on that. I'm originally from Texas myself, a little town called McKinney. Yeah, and I was thinking that this is really intriguing because here in New Mexico, we also have a trail, but it goes from El Paso north. But maybe we can do something like that here.
Well, like I said, I'm always happy just if nothing else, tell you guys, show you what we've done so that, why do anything novel? I plagiarize everything. So that's how it works. Mr. McKinney, I will add in, it's funny. I've had folks come up to me and they say, well, how come you're not dealing with stuff in Houston? How come you're not dealing with stuff at, the Sabine River? How come? And I said, you guys, you remember the little red hen story when we were growing up? Who's going to help me bake the bread? And I go, so do you have money? Do you have people on the ground? And they said, well, why did you stop at Laredo? And I said, that's how far we can drive in one day.
Okay, understood. Understood.
You guys get that. And Mr. Kinney, you can really attest to it. Texas is one hell of a big state.
Yeah,
and,
yeah. My family came in 1828. No.
So you were one of the original founders. So there you go.
Yeah,
but,
yeah.
It's it can be done. And to me, we've been successful. I know we're well regarded in Austin, and in the best of worlds, and I try not to say it too loudly, I'd really love to see either the state take up this so that the printing can continue of the maps and everything else, maintaining it, or the National Park Service. There has been talk that the military road that goes from Brownsville up to Del Rio, has been there since 1848. So it's a historic road. And there was talk at some point about making this kind of like a heritage corridor tied to that. And you could talk about World War I, like the Columbus raid that you guys have got and everything else. But we had the same stuff down here, lots of battles back and forth across the river. I'd like to see that happen, but poco a poco, as they say.
Well, even Sibley's from San Antonio to El Paso, and then north all the way up to Glorieta. Interesting. We were at Gettysburg some time ago in the National Park Service, and I do have some connections. I have taught at Albright Training Center, but I digress there. That he indicated when we identified that we were from New Mexico, he said, "Oh, the Gettysburg of the West." And everyone else on the tour said, "What?" It's like nothing happened west of the Mississippi.
Right. And, I don't fault Ken Burns, but for as little as this stuff is taught in schools, it would have been nice to have had a half an hour devoted to the war in the West, but it's all right. We'll tell the story.
Agreed.
You guys.
Well, Deb, I'm still working on the cannons. So my question about El Paso was, I understood that one of the tubes was in the high school, and I still have not been able to qualify that. So that was my question about, were you in El Paso?
Got it. All right. Well,
this recording will be available next week, either Tuesday or Wednesday, so you can see it or share it with any of your friends and family. But thank you again so much, Russ. You're always welcome back at Casa, and we will certainly talk to you this winter. See if you'd like to come back. Yeah.
Oh boy, you better betcha. So
excellent.
All right, everybody, take good care, stay healthy, get your booster shots, and hopefully I'll see you in 2022. Okay.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Bye. Thank you, everyone.